Travis boys have all finished school for the year, and I understand some of you are like, "What? We start early down here in August, a lot of times, especially for football season." But so my kids are all done. So for the next 2.5 months, if you hear screaming in the background in my house, it's probably kids fighting over video game controllers because they are home for the summer. I promise that they are fine. But I asked you this off air, Buck, and I tweeted about it here as we get into the third hour. Is there any adult joy that is as pure as the joy of a kid getting out of school for the entire summer? Like, every person who is out there listening to me right now, just thinking about how joyful that made you when you were a kid, is experiencing that from a nostalgic perspective. There are significant life moments as adults, kids, marriages, buying a home, all of these different things that are great. Maybe for some of you, retirement. I don't know what it feels like to walk out of a job and be like, I'm never doing that again. I'm done. Maybe there is a adult experience retirement style, but I can't remember anything that is just more freeing than being the kid walking out of school. Hey, that year is over, buddy. Nothing else to worry about. The big, long stretch of summer. Can you think of anything as an adult that is the equivalent of that?
No, and it's I think the first time as a kid you experience overwhelming joy, with the possible exception of like the perfect Christmas morning, which I think is also perhaps a very nice moment for a lot of kids. But it reminds me, I don't know, our school system, the way that we have it all set up. I have pretty radical ideas on this. Maybe this isn't the right forum for it, but I think kids are in school for far too long. I think that school day is basically glorified childcare for most people. I think people should spend more time with their families. I think that education has been made more democratized online than ever before. And I'm not saying no. I obviously was a big proponent of in-person learning during COVID and everything. I'm not saying get rid of school. I'm just saying. I mean, I just remember. I remember being in school, particularly high school, but being in school, it felt like all the time and always being tired, all the time, all day long,
I think
all the
that's
time.
normal.
Yeah, and that's not good. That's actually not the way you should go through life. We wouldn't accept that as adults. And people are saying, "Well, how bad is it?" It's like, no, like getting up early in the morning to practice for sports teams, or finishing sports games at 9 o'clock at night, and then having 2 hours of homework or 3 hours of homework. I mean, I went to a pretty intense place for high school, but this is not the way it should be. Anyway, I know I'm a little bit of a. Schools are a little bit more like prison than we want to admit. It's a little
Man,
yeah.
I didn't expect schools out to turn into their prisons.
I know. Well, doesn't it feel a little bit like you're the guy in the Shawshank Redemption when he gets out of prison finally on that last day of school? Should it feel like that? Or should it be, oh, I'm going to miss everybody around me? I never missed everybody. I was like, get me out of here.
Well, so I loved school, but I will say that my eyes opened a bit on the homeschooling thing when I talk to a lot of homeschooling parents and they say, hey, we can get through the entire lesson in 2 or 3 hours.
Yes.
And then the kids are able to experience other things
kids.
now.
Yes.
Now, the challenge is, what do your kids do with all that extra time? Because my kids would play video games and so I think how that time is used, every kid is different. But in all honesty, I feel incredibly fortunate as a parent. All of my kids will go public school K-6. So in our neighborhood, we have a fabulous school in our community. I feel like we've gotten amazing teachers. I feel really fortunate they are kindergarten to 6th grade. Even during COVID, it was obviously retrospect. They should have never shut down schools to finish that year. But my kids were back in school in August of 2020, full go, all those things. And the 7th through 12th grade school that my boys go to is also fabulous. So I feel like they're getting good options. But I know that a lot of parents don't necessarily feel that way.
And someone I really like on that, you guys have heard me tweet. I don't know if he'd come on, if we're really his speed, but I like this guy out of Silicon Valley, Naval Ravikant, who's he's one of the pro-Trump Silicon Valley guys now. He's like the all-in guys. He's just really, really smart and has a lot of brilliant things to say on a whole range of issues. you've seen him. He's appeared on a lot of the big podcasts, and he's a guy, Clay, who, like you, effectively unlimited resources for his children, and he does homeschooling and like tries to maximize their freedom, lesson planning or whatever it is they have to do. So he takes a very and he went to an elite high school in New York and everything, and he's one of these guys, right? Who
Yeah.
he did all the bells and whistles stuff in the education world himself, and now he's just like, I don't think that this really needs to be done. Here's some interesting stuff. When you actually look at this, you find out that because people say, well, what about look at the American educational system. It wasn't really until we were largely herded into factories and offices that the notion of a 9 months of the year and 9 to 5, essentially, I mean, maybe 9 to 3 in most schools, school day was the norm. The school, I just Googled this for fun. I mean, I knew that this was roughly the case, that all throughout the 19th century, I understand different time and everything, but pre-industrial America, yes, people had helped their families on the farms, etc. But students went to school about 78 days a year. Now, just think about this for a second. Someone like Abraham Lincoln would have grown. You say Abraham Lincoln went to school. Someone like Abraham Lincoln or his era, they would have gone to school for 2, 3, the equivalent of like 3 months, something like that. Like that, and you're able to learn a lot in those 3 months. My point is that so much of school is wasted because so much of school is just to have adults who are paid to watch children so they don't, stab themselves in the eye with a pencil or like run out in front of a train or something. It's really not about kids can't learn for 8 hours a day. Am I too radical and crazy on this? Kids cannot learn for 8 hours. Clay, you and I can't learn for 8 hours. I finished this show. My wife tries to talk to me and she's like, you're like a mummy for an hour. I'm like, yeah, because I've just put it all out there for 3 hours.
I think so. By the way, there's a Supreme Court decision today in schooling that came down tied 4-4. So Oklahoma does not have the right to have charter religious schools, and that's a simplification. Amy Coney Barrett recused herself, so the Oklahoma Supreme Court decision stands because there was not a majority in the court. Here's what I believe.
Am I totally nuts? Like let me.
Well, so here's my concern about much of schooling. It is that we have stopped to a large extent experimenting with how children are taught, and we are just throwing money at it, and a lot of kids are being failed by the process.
Well, that's because it's a jobs program. It's not about the kids, and it's about the teachers' unions getting their perks and their bennies, and not actually about stuff going for the kids the best way that it can.
Now, again, I feel because I was a public school kid, K through 12. My 7th to 12th grade, I felt like I couldn't have gotten a better education. My kids, K to 6 and 7, 12, I think because we have the resources. But public school, K to 6, has been fabulous for them. And then our 7 to 12th grade is great too. When I looked at the homeschooling concepts, one of the things that I think we do a really poor job of, and this is me getting on my soapbox now as a parent with 3 kids in school, much of what our kids are taught, they will never actually use in their real life.
Oh, man, I go off on this all
This gets
day.
me really fired up. For instance, I thought I went to a great school. I graduated. Nobody ever sat down and talked to me about how mortgages work or about what carried
Personal
interest
finance
is.
should be something that everybody learns high school age.
Very basic stuff. Balance a checkbook is old school, but just talking about life skills, I understand some of you have gone on, and my father-in-law is an engineer. At no point in life have I ever needed to find the hypotenuse of a triangle or apply the Pythagorean theorem. And I understand you're like, well, you're really just teaching your brain how to think. I think there are other things I could have taught my brain how to think that would have been more useful in my life. And so I feel like we really would benefit from basic economic training, from basic probability and statistics being embedded in school learning, and that many of the things that are a part of our regular curriculum are to a large extent useless. And that doesn't mean that if you are intrigued by something that you shouldn't be able to pursue it, because the reality is, look, I majored in history undergrad. I'm never going to stop reading history books. And if you told me tomorrow, hey, you are basically finite in the education that you have received, I want to learn something new every day. And I want to remain intellectually curious. And those are important assets to have. But I feel like a dogmatic training schedule where you teach a lot of kids things they don't need, it doesn't make sense. And by the way,
Uh,
for shop too, like I was reading a great story and more power to it. I think it's Philadelphia where they're teaching kids how to weld. If you know you're not going to go to college, these kids are getting hired. I think there's a front page Wall Street Journal I read, $75,000 a year, and they're being trained how to weld in school, and they come out and they're getting recruited. I mean, that's fabulous.
right.
Like, why don't we have more things like
Well,
this?
if people think that Doge found a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government, if you actually looked at the realities of public education in this country and what is foisted upon people and what we're paying for, especially with your property taxes and everything else, it's just a giant cartel, and it really is set up. It was never set up for the benefit of children. It was set up to be a babysitting program so that adults could go to their offices or their factories and labor. And that is the whole point of it. That just like in the Soviet Union, by the way. I mean, this is what they actually wanted. This is going back to the Industrial Revolution, the early 1900s, and that's when all of a sudden you have people going to school for most of the year, 5 days a week. Notice how it aligns with what adults need for their work schedules. I'm just saying, Clay. I mean, just to take this really simply, do you think you could have learned? I know you enjoyed. Look, I had a good grammar school experience. I thought my high school was a little too intense and a little too nerdy. I mean, I'm not particularly fond of the place. But do you think you could have learned the same amount of stuff with half of the classroom instruction?
Fuck.
I'm certain that I could have.
I went to law school. I think
No. I'm talking about young stuff. Forget about
no.
Oh,
But I think it extends into grad school, perhaps even more. I had to go to law school for 3 years to take the bar exam. I think if you had told me you have 6 months, as you used to have to study to take
yeah,
the
you
bar
used
exam,
to just be able to pass the bar exam and not have to go to law school, and you could be a lawyer.
back in the day, Andrew Jackson, you apprenticed and you got to look at the books and you got to memorize all the stuff. I think if you had told me you have 6 months to study aggressively all of the law and then you will take the bar exam, I think I could have passed the bar exam with 6 months of preparation. Instead, they made me, and look, I loved Vanderbilt Law School. I met my wife there. Some of my best friends are there. It was an incredible 3-year experience, but it basically is a barrier to being able to become a lawyer because you have to spend whatever it is, $250,000 now to go to law school to then be able to have the right to take the bar exam. I think a lot of this is blocking out achievement.
Thinking a little bit outside the box in this, Clay, you're a very sociable guy, and a lot of grad school based on. And I remember I went into media instead of grad school, so I looked at this decision, and it was just because I didn't want to rack up all the debt, and I always wanted to work in media, and it kind of just fell in my lap. Thank you, Glenn. But you would have made It's to make connections, and it's social proof essentially for a lot of people. And you would have made connections and found your social proof otherwise, without spending. But we needed you to meet Laura. I'm not saying that, but you know what I'm saying. Like,
well, I just think I am sympathetic for people who could be. So one of the things I again nerd out on is, to me, the job of any government should be to allow the largest number of people to have the greatest possible success based on individual liberty to pursue whatever their talent is. I think around a lot of time now, Buck, how many kids out there don't maximize their ability because of barriers that are put in place that are not particularly beneficial? In other words, the most brilliant lawyer in America might not be able to have the money to go to law school. And that doesn't seem right to me.
I'm a long-term gold guy. Let's talk about this for a second, shall we? If you see what gold has done, you could pull it up on a chart, for example, and you can see that for the last, I don't know, choose a number of decades, gold, if you're a long-term holder, has been a sound investment. I believe in gold. And we just had Rand Paul on today, and he's telling you the truth, which we're not actually tackling the debt. We're making the debt worse. We're going to be crowding out private sector investment. I'm sorry to say this is not going to change anytime soon and probably ever in our lifetime, which means that dollars are going to be decreasing in value. There will be inflation, and you can do something about that now. This is where gold comes in as a hedge against that inflation and the economic uncertainty and the financial crunch that it will cause. But you don't want to wait until that actually kicks in. You want to take action now and build your gold holdings over time. This is where Birch Gold Group comes in. Owning gold just makes sense, and historically, it has proven out. I've been doing this for 15 years. You think about the people that have been telling you to buy gold. Think about Rush. Decades of, hey guys, gold makes sense. And it has. It has been a sound investment. It has gone up in value. And you can check this for yourself. You don't have to just, take my word for it. In fact, in the past 12 months, the value of gold has increased by 40%. And central banks are hoarding it because they know that there's going to be more money printing. Text my name, Buck, to 989898 and Birch Gold. That's who I trust to get gold into your hands. Or this is really important. A lot of you have a 401k or an IRA. Maybe, it's got 15, 20, 50 grand in it, something like that you build up over a few years. You've switched now to another job. You got a new 401k plan. What do you do with that old 401k? You don't want to be actively managing it. But what about putting it in the safest long-term thing that any of us can think of, gold? That's where Birch Gold Group can come in. Text my name, Buck, to 989898. They can help you transfer that IRA or 401k into a gold IRA or a gold 401k, and it is so easy to do. Text my name, Buck, to 989898 or go online to birchgold.com/